Hey folks, I'm an old man about to build a PC. I've never done this before. I work mainly in the Mac environment because that's just how I grew up on computers. And I used to do a lot of creative work, or have done lots of creative work over the years. So I'm still primarily a creator. I'm not a gamer. So this build is certainly based on the creator side of things. And I needed something to upgrade from this Mac laptop that I've been using. It's like 2019. It's got the touch bar and all USB-C and all of that. I do have an eGPU with it, a 550 XT, I think, the Radeon card that's in this little puck from Sonnet. And it helps, but it's not up to speed when it comes to something like, working in 4K with multiple layers and keying or adjustment layers or any of that kind of thing. You start laying that kind of stuff on it, it is not keeping up. So I want to be able to do that. My buddy bought a creator build from NZXT, so he bought a pre-build. And a couple of our friends have bought the same one or similar. And I noticed that his render times were so much better. And his just the speed of his whole workflow was so much greater that I needed to get in on that game. So the only way to do it for the kind of money that I was looking for, I think he spent I think the base is $39.99. It's $4,000 for this the creator build from NZXT. Now, other places you could get pre-builds, but this is the one I'm going to compare to. And you'll see kind of what I was trying to do, and I'll talk a little bit about my philosophy about why I chose the things that I did. My poor wife has dealt with me putting way too much time on YouTube trying to figure out how to build a PC. But that's just how I do things. I like to do tons of research when I do something like this. So here we are. I'm going to swap us over here so we can see what's going on with the comparison between what I'm going to call the Red Rock build and the NZXT Creator build. So my Red Rock build, we're basing it on the AMD side. So the Creator build right off the bat is an Intel CPU. So I'm going to do the Ryzen 9 5950X. This CPU was $600 as opposed to the $400. But I do think it is a better CPU, 16 core, 32 thread, 8 cores, and I'm not sure how many threads in the i9 CPU. But I gave the green light to this one over here, the AMD Ryzen. The reason I chose it was also because it's cooler, and I wanted something that I could air cool comfortably. I didn't want to do a liquid cool build. So in terms of how I set up my workflow, in terms of the drives, I decided to go with an OS drive, and a program drive, and then a project drive, and then a cache drive. That's not how the NZXT is built. That thing, that machine, has a very good Western Digital NVMe for its primary drive. It's 1 terabyte. I went with the Seagate Firecuda 530. I don't actually know if one of those is better than the other. This is just what I did. I would give, to me, this is a wash. They both get green lights. I think either one, those are equally good. Where I think now we get into where you can't really do apples to apples because I'm using a project drive. So this would be where, the actual projects themselves, the Premiere projects or After Effects projects or anything like that, and the assets will all go on this project drive. That's not really how they do it. It doesn't appear to me over here. I think everything in the project and assets and everything is going on the creator build. I think all of that goes onto this OS drive, what I would call an OS drive. So I think everything is in one place on that. And then they've got a storage drive, which is a hard drive, and it's a 4 terabyte hard drive, which is great, and it's a great drive. The Seagate Barracuda, is built specifically for that, so it really is a great drive. And look at the price. You can get them for about that, I think, for 4 terabytes. That's great. So for me, the project drive is a 2 terabyte Samsung 980 Pro. I like it a lot. It's also obviously the NVMe. All my drives, or at least the primary drives, are NVMe drives. And quite a bit more. Look how much more expensive, $279 versus $75. But all my storage is going to be external storage, so I'm going to use something like a Seagate external drive to do my... Is that going to do it? No, it's not going to show up. Anyway, it's one of these nice big chunky external drives, and I'll just do overnight transfers and so on, for big projects. Okay, so there's no cache drive in the NZXT build, so I went with another 980 Pro. It's from Samsung. In this case, only a 500 gigabyte, because I don't think you need nearly the same amount of space, as far as I can tell. And so that's $100. So that's another $100 on that. All right, so now we get into, so I'm giving the green light really to that, to have the extra cache drive. I think is a positive in terms of the internal workflow for video editing. That's as far as I understand. We'll have to see in practice whether it really turns out that way, because I have no real experience in this. So. Motherboard, the motherboard in the NZXT is this Z490, perfectly good motherboard. I'm sure a little bit of a previous generation, but a strong motherboard, especially for an Intel Creator build, I think. So that's what little I understand about that. I went with the ASUS ProArt X570 because it's a 570 because it's a AMD build, and so I gave the green light to that. I think that's a net positive for the motherboard. Now it's far more expensive, so that's another thing. But anyway, so RAM I think is kind of better on the side that I got. That both are built with 64 gigs of RAM. Mine will be built with 64 gigs of RAM. And the RAM itself is similar, except that this is 3600, so it's a faster RAM. This is 3000, so it should be a little more future-proofed, and it should actually function a little bit better for certain things, renders and multitasking and so on. So it should be a little bit faster. And I'm going to point out here that I did not mean to get this RGB, but it is what I wound up buying. I just got in a little bit of a hurry. This is not the actual RAM that I meant to get for this machine, but it's what I got. And I'm not going to, I think it's perfectly good. And my only hope is that this RGB crown on this thing doesn't interfere with the fans on the CPU cooler. So it's an air cooler and it's got big giant fans on it. And so I'm a little bit worried about that. I didn't want the taller, and the RGB is going to be blanked out by the fan anyway for the most part. So that was a mistake, but anyway, it is what it is. And I do think that's overall it's better. It's just faster, a little bit faster RAM. Not a huge deal, but I would give the green light to that. I went with a CPU cooler, air cooler. This is a Noctua NH-D15, which is sort of top of the line. I think that's universally understood. Noctua knows what they're doing as far as this stuff's concerned, and the NH-D15 is the newer version of the D14, I believe. So again, all of this is just stuff that I'm learning, and I sort of, that's what the limit of my understanding of that. But it seems to be perfectly good, especially with an AMD Ryzen CPU. Which runs cooler in general than a similar Intel chip. So on this side, this machine is built with NZXT Kraken X63, and that's liquid cooled. So I gave the green light to that because I think that liquid cooling is probably a net plus. Obviously, it's all debatable, and the air cooler is technically a little bit more reliable, but I think, all things considered, I would give this the thumbs up on that. But this is just what I want to do for reliability and simplicity's sake. GPU, now this is where my whole philosophy behind this comes in. In this case, the GPU is the NVIDIA RTX 3090, which is a monster GPU. Absolutely wonderful. The problem has been no one can get them. So if everybody knows what's been happening in the GPU market for the last year, maybe more, year and a half, Ethereum mining has destroyed and completely distorted this whole GPU marketplace. You can't get one for MSRP. You can't get any GPU for MSRP. So MSRP is kind of a joke. And I wonder if when the manufacturers put it out, do they even really believe what number they're placing on that MSRP? Because no one can get it for MSRP. Not right now. Now, that's going to change pretty quickly. And so my philosophy here was, yes, the NXT build has that built in because they probably bought a bunch and they might have had a bunch sitting on hand. So they got good pricing on that. I put 2200 in here for that because that's what you can get them for right now, if you can find one. That's changing, and it's changing pretty quickly. But for the moment, what I wanted to do was just get this thing up and built. And so I went with this 3060, the RTX 3060, which is about maybe half the power of the 3090. It's a low wattage type of GPU that will, I think, for my uses, be fine to get this thing up and running and do 4K editing. I don't think I'm going to have any troubles with that. But the idea here was to get a CPU, motherboard, cooler, all that stuff that I'm not going to really want to change anytime soon, and make that a little bit future-proofed as much as I could. Everything changes very quickly, of course, as we know in these markets, in this world of PCs and computers in general. But I think that'll work. All right, so the total, adding up all the parts for the Red Rock build, 3169, and for the NZXT 3780 US dollars. I don't think then you wind up, you pay $39.99, you pay $4,000, so they only charge a couple $100. In a sense, again, their GPU cost is the big wild card in this whole thing. But so they probably do make $1,000. I think that's kind of a standard, $900, $1,000 to build the thing for you. So that's the premium you pay to get a pre-built. So it's a little bit more in parts. I think overall, I didn't mention the PSU, but I think the PSU is a wash again. Just because they're both 850, 80 plus gold. That's I think the Corsair is a very well-respected PSU, so I'm very happy with that. I have no idea what this is. I don't know if this is a rebranded thing for NZXT or what it is. But in any case, they're both 850 watt gold, so and very similar pricing. Okay, so anyway, the point of this whole thing in summary is, yes, I got cheaper parts, but I also got a much less powerful GPU. And given that I'm a creator, the GPU is very important. So by the time I go back and get the GPU that I'm really looking for, and maybe I'll sell the 360 and be able to get a little bit of money for that, but it's going to cost me another at least $1,000 on top of what I've already paid. So, this goes up above 4,000, I think, by the time, even next year, by the time I put a better GPU in. So I think cost-wise, it's actually pretty similar, but I do think this build is a win in terms of the CPU, the workflow with the drives, the motherboard itself, and a little bit faster RAM, quite a bit faster RAM. So I think in all those senses, this is a good build for me to sort of future-proof a little bit and maybe wind up, with a machine that will last me 5 or 6 years pretty comfortably, doing 4K, and then maybe we'll get into 6, 8, 12, whatever Ks that we wind up getting into in terms of video standards and editing. They're already there. I'm just not in that world where I need to be editing at that level. 4K is still very good for me, and most of my stuff winds up being streamed or on the internet in one way or another anyway. So there aren't that many reasons for me to get too excited about much, much higher standards. Now, as I start to bring in other types of footage and start shooting other things myself and investing in other cameras and so on, over the next few years, that will change. But I think 4K is a good place to get settled for the moment. So I'm feeling good about this build, feeling good about what I've spent on it. I know I'm getting high-end parts, and I know it's going to be a solid functioning machine. Okay, so thanks a lot. We'll see you in the garage.